All right, so this is the last presentation for Unit 4, and this one we're looking at current issues in Latin America. So first big issue we're going to talk about is the environment. So the rainforest, of course, is being destroyed, and that's what's called a critical resource. And so what that means basically is that we need that for human survival, that it plays such a huge role in how the earth functions, and of course in how we survive, and the fact that there's so many things in the rainforest that we could possibly use to cure probably many diseases and things like that, maybe even cancer. And then biodiversity, we've used that term already. So there's a wide range of plants and animal species in the rainforest. I mentioned how it's about 90%, 85, 90% of all that life on Earth is in the rainforest. So deforestation, of course, is the destruction of the rainforest. And it's costly because, I mean, first off, all the animal life and plant life we would lose, and the fact that how much that can enrich our lives and possibly even cure diseases. And then, of course, the oxygen that we need in order to survive on this planet and to clean out the atmosphere. So things that it does, it regulates the climate for the entire planet, it absorbs carbon dioxide, again, for the entire planet, and produces oxygen for the entire planet. So it is very important just for the function of Earth. So the Amazon, we see about 30 million acres per year lost. Which, I mean, that's a huge amount, every year. And it's mainly for logging, so logging for timber, raising livestock, and a lot of this is indigenous tribes. Tropical crops, things like pineapple and banana that are grown. This is usually companies like Dole. And then the extraction of minerals and natural gas. And so there's a lot of minerals and natural gas underneath the rainforest. But of course, there's many other places on Earth that we could get those things. All right, so the reason why destruction of the rainforest is really bad, because you may think, well, it can just grow back. What's the big deal? Well, it's a lot harder for the rainforest to grow back because the soil is actually not that fertile, considering that it's a rainforest. Because think about it, once you clear the rainforest and that canopy is gone, it rains on the daily. It rains a lot. And so all the nutrients are washed out of the soil. It's not a nutrient-rich soil. And then also any seeds that may get into the soil aren't able to germinate. They're washed out as well. Because of that. And so you just don't get the nutrients you need, and the rainfall is always washing out everything you need. And of course, with no trees, you get a lot of erosion in the area. So as you can see here in this photo, that soil is just crappy. I mean, there's nothing's going to be growing there. And keep in mind, too, the animals, like the monkeys, mainly live in the canopy. They live in the treetops. That's where most of the life of the rainforest is. And so when you cut down the rainforest, you're getting rid of literally all the animals. All right, so some solutions to this. First one is restrict economic development, obviously, in the rainforest. So things like Dole and things like that, they can go grow their pineapples somewhere else. Education programs, not only for people outside that live outside the rainforest like you and me, but also for the people in the rainforest, for the locals, and showing them that they actually have a much larger impact in doing what they do on the rest of the world. And then debt for nature swap. A lot of these countries owe money to the United States. And the idea is that if they, instead of paying us back, if they take that money and invest it in preserving the rainforest and preserving nature, and they show us the programs they're going to do and show us how that's going to be used and how it's going to actually conserve nature, then we allow them to do that. So basically, we forgive their debt, and instead of paying that money to us, then they use that money to invest in holding on to the rainforest and keeping it. And then ecotourism, and this is similar to what I've done in Costa Rica. So basically, you go on a trip, but you learn about the rainforest, and you're in there so you can see the importance of it. And so then that basically just gets awareness out more so, and people supporting the idea of conserving the rainforest. All right, other environment concerns. In urban areas, we see a lot of overcrowding, so some horrible pollution in a lot of these cities. And a lot of these buildings I mentioned, there's no building codes. So a lot of them are at risk from erosion, because a lot of these are built on the mountainsides. In some of these areas, you see a lot of mudslides. And so sometimes there's a mudslide on a hillside. I mean, the whole area could go down and kill everybody. Also, they don't control auto emissions and or fertilizers or anything like that. And the reason is because they believe your most developed countries, that's what MDC stands for, should worry about that. So basically, like the United States, we have a really strong infrastructure, a strong economy, and so we can put in emission controls and things like that. So like going to get your car inspected to make sure that it's not emitting too much pollution. And of course, we have to pay a tax for that. Whereas in your poorer countries, they're like, look, we don't really have time to focus on that. We got other pressing issues like healthcare and education that need to be taken care of, and tons of poor people that need jobs. And so the idea of having any kind of like auto emission control or a tax on that or anything It's just not something on their radar because to them, that's just not that important yet. They've got other pressing issues. So as you can see here, like the tenement problem, like if there's a mudslide on this mountain, everyone's dead. I mean, there's no survival there whatsoever. And so you'll see things being built in places that here in the U.S. would never happen. And then, of course, pollution, as you can see here, all this haze here is pollution. It's being trapped because of the mountains surrounding the city. And so it's, of course, creates a health risk for the people living there. All right, then politically speaking, in the past, of course, we've talked about this, how the governments were very oppressive oligarchies. And so you had a junta, which is, again, military running the government, or a caudillo, or the dictator runs. So people, of course, aren't trusting of the government. It's really hard to when you've had this history in the past. And so hence why people turn to crime. And here you can see your most corrupt and least corrupt countries on Earth. World. This is just looking at the Western Hemisphere. So we're in the 11th to 29th least corrupt country on Earth, 18. Canada is even less corrupt than we are. But then, of course, you get into Latin America. Mexico, they're in the most corrupt, but at least they're on the lower end of that list. But you get like Paraguay, for example, one of the top 10 most corrupt countries. And then, of course, Argentina, Bolivia, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador is on that list as well. And then the least corrupt countries would be Chile is the best one, Peru, and Brazil. And so you see some getting much better in the area. And then, of course, threats that you have from inside. Of course, you got drug wars, you got civil wars, insurgents, and things like that. And the drug wars, cartels a lot of times will force children into fighting. So you also have child soldiers as well in some of these countries. All right, so today, democracy is spreading. I mentioned that already. But here's what you need for democracy to really take root in these countries. You need free and fair elections. So that means no corruption within the government, no controlling the elections. You need the citizens to participate in it, which is hard when you've had so much distrust of the government. So you need citizens to actually take part and trust the government and get involved. Majority rule with minority rights. That means that even your minorities still have a voice. You can't just totally oppress them. And need guaranteed freedoms for the people, like freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of the press and things like that. And those need to be guaranteed and allowed for that to actually work. All right, their economy. So again, the effects of colonialism. Sorry, hold on. The effects of colonialism. They still mainly export raw materials instead of actually making something with it where they can make more money if they actually manufactured more so. They still have a large income gap, so there's just not a middle class really. And so the poor, the people in poverty, their problems they're facing is the lack of education, and it's not like they could just go back to school and get a better education and better themselves like you can here. They can't read, and so therefore you can't find jobs. I mean, you can't read a help wanted sign if you can't read. I mean, so you just can't get a job. You can't purchase goods. You don't have money, so you can't purchase anything. You end up living in the slums. You have nothing to lose because you don't have anything, so then you turn to crime. And then you get this feeling of disenfranchisement. So disenfranchised. You have no political say, and so, again, it's going to be hard to lead to democracy when a large portion of the population totally feels outside of it, that they don't matter and they don't have a voice. So this leads to crime, and it's basically this is the same kind of thing to an extent that can lead to terrorism as well, as we've studied. All right, I mean, you can look at these charts if you want to on your own. This is just looking at population increases here, for example, in different countries as well. And so basically projections is that a lot of these countries are going to start shrinking. And then this one is just looking at how the cities are built. And so, again, showing you kind of how the elite and middle class live together and kind of stay in those areas, whereas in the working class is also around in there. But then the slums, this is where your poorest people are. So, again, on the outskirts of the city, the barrios. And this is the area of the city that's hard to control, that is just growing without any planned growth. I mean, no one's planning this area. Electricity and water can't make it out to these outlying areas. And they just keep expanding and expanding as all these peasants continue to move in to these cities. And so that's generally how a Latin American city looks for the most part.